I was driving alone through Arizona late at night on my way back from visiting my sister in California. The highway was quiet and mostly empty, just long stretches of road under the moonlight and the occasional passing truck. After about 6 hours on the road, I really needed to stop, both for the bathroom and to stretch my legs. So when I saw a rest stop sign up ahead, I took the exit without thinking much of it. The place was dimly lit, a handful of street lamps casting pale circles of light over the parking lot. There were maybe 3 cars parked way in the back, and one white sedan parked just a few spaces from the entrance to the building. I didn't pay it much attention as I pulled into a spot near the bathrooms. The air was still, and the whole place felt too quiet. I grabbed my bag from the passenger seat and headed toward the restroom. As I walked, I heard the faint sound of a car door shutting, and when I glanced over, I saw that the white sedan now had someone sitting in the driver's seat. I couldn't make out their face, but I felt their eyes on me. I tried to shake it off and went inside. The bathroom was empty and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I was washing my hands when I heard footsteps echoing down the hallway outside. Slow and deliberate, the sound of boots on tile. I froze for a second and then forced myself to keep moving like nothing was wrong. The footsteps stopped just outside the door, then started again, this time coming in. I looked up in the mirror and saw a man enter, tall, wearing a dark hoodie with the hood pulled up. He didn't say anything, just walked to the far stall and shut the door. My gut told me to leave immediately. I dried my hands quickly and headed out. When I stepped outside, I immediately noticed my car door was slightly ajar. I knew I had locked it before going in. My heart started pounding as I got closer. I saw something white on the driver's seat. It was a folded piece of paper. I opened it, and in messy handwriting it said, "I was gonna see you soon," with no name, no number, just that. My stomach dropped, and I scanned the lot. The white sedan was still there, but now it was idling, headlights on, pointed toward the exit. I didn't see the driver, but I could feel they were watching me. I jumped into my car, locked the doors, and started the engine. As I pulled out, the white sedan pulled out too, following me onto the highway. My mind was racing. I knew I had to get away fast, but there was nowhere to turn for miles. I stayed in the right lane, going just over the speed limit, hoping maybe they would pass. But every time I slowed down or sped up, they matched my pace exactly. Finally, I saw a sign for the next town and took the exit at the last second, swerving into a gas station that was still open. I pulled up right in front of the store entrance and ran inside, telling the cashier to call the police. When I looked back outside, the white sedan was stopped at the far edge of the lot, the driver just sitting there in the dark. Then, without warning, they drove off into the night. The police arrived a few minutes later. I gave them the note and described the car. They searched the area but didn't find anything. They told me rest stops at night can be dangerous and that sometimes people hang around them looking for isolated travelers. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound made me jump. And even now I can't stop thinking about how they got into my locked car, how they knew I'd be alone, and what they meant by, "I was gonna see you soon." The whole drive home I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see those headlights behind me again. And for weeks afterward, I avoided rest stops completely, choosing instead to push through long drives no matter how tired I was, because that night taught me that sometimes the scariest thing isn't the dark or the isolation. It's the feeling that someone has chosen you, singled you out, and you don't know why or what would have happened if you hadn't left when you did. I had been on the road for close to 10 hours straight, driving from Louisiana toward Arizona, and somewhere past midnight, fatigue started creeping in. So I decided to pull into a truck stop off the highway in the middle of rural Texas. It was one of those isolated places with buzzing fluorescent lights that barely lit the cracked pavement, and a handful of big rigs parked in the back lot, while a few smaller cars sat closer to the entrance. I remember thinking it was the kind of place where you either get in and out quickly, or you end up talking to some lonely trucker who just wants company. I wasn't really expecting anything out of the ordinary. I just wanted some coffee, maybe a snack, and a few minutes to stretch before getting back on the interstate. As soon as I stepped inside, I noticed a man standing near the end of one of the aisles. He wasn't browsing or moving around like everyone else. He was just watching.
At first, I figured maybe he was waiting for someone or just zoning out. I grabbed a cup from the coffee station and started pouring, but as I turned around to look for sugar, I realized he had moved closer, now only about 10 feet away, and that same locked gaze was on me. His eyes didn't wander, they didn't blink much either. I tried to ignore it and headed toward the refrigerated section for a bottle of water. That's when he walked up alongside me and in this low, almost conversational tone, asked if I wanted a free ride. I laughed nervously and told him I had my own car parked outside, but he didn't move away. He just kept staring. Then he leaned in slightly and said my first name, clear as day. The thing is, I never told him my name. There was no way he could have known it. I wasn't wearing anything with a name tag, and I hadn't spoken to anyone else in the store. It was like ice water hit the back of my neck. I froze for a second, and then asked how he knew my name. He didn't answer. Instead, he gave this strange little grin. Not a friendly grin, more like someone who's already decided something you haven't. I put my things on the counter, paid quickly, and walked out to my car. But when I got there, my stomach dropped because he was already standing out in the lot, right next to my driver's side door, like he had left before me just to be there. I didn't say a word, just unlocked the door, slid in, and locked it again in one motion. As I started the engine, he stepped closer, bending down so his face was level with my window, and in that same low voice, he said, "See you soon." I peeled out of that lot so fast my tires screeched, my heart hammering in my chest the whole time. I drove for over an hour before I stopped at another gas station, parked under bright lights, and checked my car inside and out just to make sure no one had gotten in. Later that week, when I told a friend about it, he sent me an article from a local Texas news site about a man matching the exact description who had been linked to multiple disappearances from truck stops along the interstate. Police suspected he targeted people traveling alone late at night, offering rides or just finding ways to get close enough to grab them. They hadn't caught him yet, and seeing his face on that news page made my skin crawl, because it was the same face that had been less than a foot from mine in that parking lot. Since that night, I have never again stopped at a deserted truck stop in the middle of the night, no matter how tired I am. And I still catch myself looking in my mirrors a little more often than I used to, wondering if one day I might see that same white grin in the reflection.
We had been driving for hours through the endless, sun-baked highways of Nevada, the kind of stretch where the road ahead wavers in the heat and there's nothing but desert, sand, and the occasional tumbleweeds to remind you the world still exists, when the fuel gauge dropped dangerously close to empty and we knew we had no choice but to stop at the next gas station we found, no matter what it looked like. So when an old sun-faded sign appeared in the distance with the words "Gas, Food, Restrooms" barely hanging onto its frame, we pulled off the road and into what looked like a place frozen in time. The cracked concrete lot was almost completely empty except for a single rusted pickup truck parked near the side of the building. The gas pumps were the ancient kind with the rolling number dials and paint peeling off the sides, and the glass windows were so dusty they barely reflected the late afternoon light. Inside the small building, behind the counter, stood a man in an oil-stained work shirt who greeted us with a smile that didn't move from his face for the entire time we were there. Not a friendly, casual smile, but something too wide, too still, like it had been practiced in a mirror until it didn't need a change. My wife stayed outside with the car while I went in to pay, and as I stepped through the door, I immediately noticed the walls. Every inch of them was covered with photographs. At first I thought maybe they were old family photos or local customers, but then I started to really look, and the faces seemed different. The expressions too serious, and the photos were all printed in the same cheap 4x6 format, most of them taped to the wall without frames. Then I saw the captions under a few of them. Names, dates, and the word missing printed in faded black ink. Dozens of them, maybe over 100. People of all ages, some looking like they've been gone for decades, others from only a year or two ago. My chest tightened as I walked slowly to the counter. The man's eyes followed me without blinking, that smile still locked in place. I slid a 20 across the counter and told him to fill pump 2. His hands moved slowly, almost deliberately, as if each motion was thought through before it happened, and while he rang it up, he asked in that same steady tone where we were headed. I gave him a vague answer, not wanting to be too specific, and he nodded without looking away from my face. I could feel something in the air that made my instincts scream, like we were being measured for something we didn't want to understand. I grabbed my change without waiting for a receipt, muttered a thanks, and walked quickly back to the car. My wife saw my expression and didn't even ask. She just said go as soon as I opened the door. I started the engine and pulled out of that lot faster than I probably should have. The man still standing behind the counter, still smiling through the window, watching us drive away. As we merged back onto the highway, I glanced into the rearview mirror and saw the rusted pickup pulling out from the side of the building, keeping a steady distance behind us for a couple of miles before turning off onto a dirt road without a signal. I don't know if it was coincidence or something else, but we didn't stop again until we were deep into California. And that night in the motel, I looked up Missing Persons Nevada and nearly dropped my phone when I recognized 2 of the faces from the gas station wall in an active case database. Both of them had last been seen near small desert towns off the same highway we'd been driving, and both cases were still unsolved. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that if we had lingered even a few minutes longer, our faces might have been up on that wall too, printed in cheap 4x6 and labeled missing.
It was just after midnight when I pulled into a rest stop along Interstate 80, somewhere in the endless flatness of Nebraska. The kind of stop that's mostly empty at that hour, except for the glow of vending machines and a few semis parked for the night, engines idling low. I had been driving for nearly 9 hours straight, my eyes dry from staring at the road, so I figured I'd take a quick break before pushing on. I found a spot toward the far end of the lot, away from the main building, where it was quiet enough to hear the occasional hiss of air brakes from the truck area. I shut off the engine, leaned my seat back, and scrolled absently through my phone, just trying to let my brain rest. That's when I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye, a blue cargo van creeping slowly across the lot. At first I thought it might just be someone looking for a place to park, but something about the way it moved felt wrong. It wasn't heading toward the designated parking spots, and it was keeping its headlights on low, almost as if it didn't want to draw attention. The van passed in front of me once, then looped around the lot in a lazy arc, and that's when I saw the side door, sliding open just a few inches before snapping shut again as it rounded the corner. My gut tightened immediately. I stayed still, pretending to be absorbed in my phone while watching in my peripheral vision. The van made another slow loop, this time passing even closer, maybe 15 feet away. The side door cracked open again, and I caught a glimpse of a dark interior, the outline of someone's arm, and the faintest movement inside, like there were more than one person in there. Every instinct in my body was screaming to start the car and leave, but I didn't want to spook them into acting faster. I quietly locked my doors, slid my phone down out of view, and with my other hand pulled up the keypad to dial 911. The dispatcher answered, and I whispered that there was a suspicious van circling the rest stop, possibly attempting to lure or grab someone. She told me to stay on the line, keep the doors locked, and describe the vehicle. As I spoke, the van made a third pass, slowing almost to a stop right next to my car. The side doors started to slide again, this time wider, and I swear I could feel the eyes from inside fixing on me through the narrow opening. Just then, the dispatcher said an officer was less than 2 minutes away. I think they must have heard the faint sound of my voice because the van suddenly accelerated, tires squealing slightly as it made for the exit. Not 30 seconds later, a state trooper cruiser rolled into the lot with its lights flashing. I pointed toward the exit, and the trooper spun the car around to give chase, disappearing onto the highway. A few minutes later, the officer came back alone. He said they'd lost the van after it turned off onto a rural road, no license plate visible. Then he told me something that still sends chills down my spine. This exact tactic, blue cargo vans circling rest stops late at night, opening the side door just enough to grab someone, is a known method used in attempted abductions, sometimes for human trafficking. The victims are usually traveling alone, sitting in their cars, tired, unaware, until it's too late. I sat there for a few seconds, my heart hammering in my ears, before starting the car and leaving without looking back. The whole drive to my motel that night, I couldn't shake the image of that slow-moving van and the shadowy shapes inside, waiting for the right moment to pull someone into the dark. If I hadn't locked my doors, or if I'd stepped out to stretch, I might not have been the one telling this story.
Long-haul trucking teaches you a lot about staying alert, but sometimes the fatigue creeps in no matter how much coffee you've had. That night I was pushing my logbook hours, the highway stretching endlessly through the Midwest, when I finally decided I needed to stop. My eyes were heavy, my shoulders sore from hours behind the wheel of my rig. The nearest place to pull over was the rest area off exit 14, a spot I'd heard other drivers mention on the CB, not always in a good way. They called it a trouble stop, the kind of place where too many things had gone missing. Fuel siphoned from tanks, catalytic converters sawed off, even entire trailers broken into while the drivers slept. Still, I figured I'd park for a couple of hours, lock up, and keep my head down. It was close to 2:30 in the morning when I rolled into the lot. The sodium lights overhead bathed the cracked asphalt in a sickly orange glow, and the whole place was half shrouded in fog. A few other trucks were scattered around, most with their cabs dark, curtains drawn. There was a small building with restrooms and vending machines, but I wasn't planning on leaving the cab. I parked near the edge of the lot, killed the engine, and did my usual routine. Doors locked, windows up, dash camera running, GPS tracker on. I reclined my seat and let myself drift off, the faint hum of distant highway traffic like white noise in the background. It couldn't have been more than 40 minutes later when I woke up to the sound of soft, deliberate footsteps on the gravel beside my trailer. My first thought was that it might just be another driver stretching his legs, but the sound didn't fade. It circled. Whoever it was moving slowly, almost in sync with my breathing, like they were trying not to be heard. I stayed perfectly still, barely cracking one eyelid to glance at my side mirror. At first, I didn't see anyone, but then a shadow slid across the reflected glow of the lot's lights, low, hunched, and moving toward the back of my trailer. My pulse quickened. I reached quietly into my center console for the small flashlight I kept there. Before I could use it, I heard a faint scraping sound, metal against metal, coming from the rear latch. Someone was testing it. The noise stopped for a moment, and I told myself it was just my imagination. That's when there was a sudden, sharper sound, like a tool slipping, followed by another pair of footsteps. More than one person. I slowly sat up, careful not to rock the cab, and glanced toward my passenger side mirror. Two figures now, both wearing hooded sweatshirts, were standing near the rear doors, one crouched down, the other keeping watch. Then came the sound I'll never forget. The slow, deliberate click of the door handle being tested. They were trying the lock. My rig was secure, but hearing that sound while you're trapped inside is something primal. It makes every hair on your neck stand up. I debated laying on the air horn to scare them off, but something told me to wait, to see what they'd do next. That's when I caught movement in my driver's side mirror. Another figure, this one much closer, creeping along the side of my cab. Whoever these guys were, they weren't just after my cargo. They were surrounding me. I quietly grabbed my phone and dialed 911, keeping my voice low as I told the dispatcher my location, the number of suspects, and what they were doing. She told me to stay on the line and not to engage.
While I was talking, I could hear them whispering outside, their words muffled but urgent. One of them tapped on the trailer door twice, like a signal, and the one near my cab reached into his pocket. That was enough for me. I slammed my hand down on the air horn. The blaring blast shattered the quiet night, and the figures outside froze for a split second before bolting in different directions. Through the mirrors, I saw them sprint toward the tree line at the far end of the lot, disappearing into the darkness. The dispatcher said troopers were already on the way. 2 patrol cars arrived within minutes, their lights cutting through the fog. I climbed out and met the officers, who walked me around the rig. That's when I saw it. Long, fresh scratches around the trailer lock and small pry marks along the edge of the door. Clear signs they'd been trying to force it open. One officer pointed to a security camera mounted on a light pole and said they'd pulled the footage. Later, while giving my statement, one of the troopers shook his head and told me they'd had multiple reports of similar incidents at this rest area in recent months. Groups of 2 or 3 working together, targeting truckers and sometimes even RV travelers. They move fast, know how to stay out of sight from casual passersby, and vanish before most people even wake up. Sure enough, a few hours later, I got a call from the officer saying the footage showed exactly what I'd described. 3 individuals, faces partially covered, prowling around my trailer with what looked like crowbars or large screwdrivers. No plates on the vehicle they arrived in, and no clear trail once they ran into the woods. When I finally got back on the road that morning, the adrenaline had worn off, but the unease hadn't. I kept replaying the sound of those footsteps in my head, the knowledge that 3 strangers had been inches from me while I slept. For the rest of that run, I avoided exit 14 completely, no matter how tired I was. And now, whenever other drivers mention stopping there, I tell them flat out, keep driving.